Have you ever heard a loved one's voice calling you late at night, even though you knew they were asleep? Or worse, long gone? Welcome to Whispers at 3 a.m., where the stories sound like dreams, but feel way too real. If you enjoy chilling tales, eerie mysteries, and the kind of stories that make you second-guess what you heard in the dark, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because tonight's story might change the way you look at the people you trust most. Are you ready? Let's begin. I grew up on the edge of an old pine forest, where the towering treetops whispered to the wind, and the morning fog drifted like an unfinished lullaby. Our house, just me and my mother, was tucked away in the middle of nature, like a small secret. No one ever visited, and no one passed by. We lived quietly, without noise, without needing much. My mother was a soft-spoken woman who loved growing wild chrysanthemums and cooking traditional dishes from recipes she had learned from my grandmother. She didn't speak much, but the way she looked at me, the subtle nod she gave whenever I came home on time, made me feel like my life had its own quiet rhythm, simple and complete. Each morning, I would wake up to sunlight seeping through thin curtains, crawling up the dark wooden ceiling. The faint aroma of coffee drifted from the kitchen. The sound of a knife chopping vegetables repeated steadily, pleasant, like a familiar background melody. At night, when I sat outside reading or simply listening to the insects, my mother would call me in with the same line every time. "Come eat, child." No more, no less. That line echoed from the front porch, gentle, but loud enough to cut through the trees and wind, finding its way to me like an invisible thread, pulling me home. When I was little, I used to joke that if I ever got lost in the woods, all I'd need was to hear that sentence to find my way back. My mother would just smile, lips closed, wrinkles at the corner of her eyes, as if she knew something I didn't. Maybe she did. Summers here were strangely beautiful. The daylight was golden like poured honey, and the nights cool enough for the wool sweaters my mother knitted. I often walked along a narrow path through the forest, one I assumed had been carved by either past wanderers or wild animals. I wasn't sure, but it was always clean, always smelled of rotting wood and dried leaves. One time, I asked my mother, "Why don't we move into town, closer to the hospital, easier for shopping?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked out the window, where the old pines swayed like waves, then quietly said, "It's peaceful here. I don't need anything else." I never asked again. Life on the forest's edge was like that, quiet but not empty. Each day passed like a thin mist, weightless, yet enveloping me with the subtle presence of nature and my mother. We had a habit of not locking the door during the day. In this area, everyone knew each other, or if they didn't, they simply didn't care. But night was different. My mother always locked the door thoroughly. 2 locks, a horizontal bolt, and an old-fashioned key lock. Windows closed tight too, though I often complained it made the house stuffy. She never explained why, only said, "The forest at night isn't like during the day. Some things only wake after sunset." Back then, I thought she was just superstitious. Now, I'm not so sure. I was 28, 3 months unemployed after a round of company layoffs. Instead of rushing to find a new job, I decided to come back and stay with my mother for a while. Partly because I missed her, but mostly because I needed silence. In the city, everything screams. Cars, deadlines, people. Here, even the birds whisper. My father died young. I don't remember his face. All I know is that after he passed, my mother never remarried. She poured everything into me, not with loud affection, but a slow, steady love, warm like broth simmering on a small fire. When I left for school, she still kept my room clean, even washed the blanket every month, though no one slept in it. One evening in early April, when the fog was thicker than usual, I sat outside with a book in my lap, the cold air creeping into my collar. I heard my mother's voice call, "Come eat, child." Her tone was clear, steady, with that gentle scolding edge she always used when soup was about to go cold. I smiled, marked my page, dusted off my pants, and walked toward the porch. The kitchen was glowing with warm yellow light. The scent of lotus root soup wafted all the way to the porch. I stepped inside. My mother was pouring water, her back turned to me. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. But something small, so small, like a fine thorn pricking my heart, felt off. I couldn't remember seeing her walk out to the porch. No footsteps. No sound of the door opening. Just a voice coming from outside the door, as if someone was imitating a voice I knew too well to doubt. I shivered, then shook my head and chuckled. "You're just tired, paranoid. Who else could it be but Mom?" But from that moment on, I started paying attention and slowly realized sometimes the most familiar thing can be the most terrifying. I quickly forgot that little incident. Maybe it was because that lotus root soup tasted unusually good, sweet and light, in just the right balance, as if my mother had cooked it using some special well water, not the filtered tap, as usual. She didn't say a word, just placed an extra piece of fish in my bowl and chewed quietly. Her meals always had a soft kind of soundtrack. The clink of spoon on ceramic, the gentle crunch of chewing, and the whisper of wind outside the wooden window. I had 2 bowls of rice, slept a deep, dreamless sleep, and forgot. The next evening, I went out to the backyard again, carrying a cup of herbal tea my mother had steeped from mint leaves grown behind the kitchen. The night was colder than usual. The sky was clear, stars shining sharp and bright. There's something strangely comforting about staring up into the dark sky. It makes you feel small, like you're back in your mother's arms, protected by the night instead of afraid of it. I began to doze off on the wooden chair, head tilted to the left, the cup still warm in my hand. And then I heard it. "Come eat, child." I opened my eyes. The voice was soft as mist, yet unmistakable. The tone was identical to the night before. Not just the words, but the rhythm, the pauses between them, the way she emphasized eat, as if someone was replaying a perfectly recorded voice. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. The kitchen light was on. I stood and walked around to the front door. But my mother wasn't there. Only the empty porch. No footsteps, no creaky hinges. No sound of the door opening and closing like it always did. I stepped into the house, not quite suspicious, just puzzled. My mother was standing at the sink, rinsing vegetables. The water trickled softly. I asked, "Did you just call me?" She didn't turn around, just said, "No, I thought you were sleeping out there." I stood still for a moment. The house felt colder than I remembered. Or maybe my heart had just skipped a beat. That night I didn't fall asleep right away. I lay there listening to the wind rustling through the window slats, replaying the way my mother said no. Not rushed, not nervous, but also not confident. Maybe she forgot. Old people forget things, right? Right? I decided to try something. The next night, I waited until late, after my mother had already gone to bed. I texted her beforehand. "I'm heading out to the yard for a bit of fresh air. I'll come in soon." She replied with a smiling emoji. I brought my tea and sat on the wooden chair like always. The moon was dimmer that night. Clouds floated like sea foam. The forest felt darker than usual. The breeze was gentle but chilly, just enough to raise goosebumps on my arms, though I couldn't tell if it was the weather or something else. I waited. Half an hour, nothing, no voice, nothing at all. I chuckled at myself, stood up, dusted off my shirt, and right then, as if on cue, "Come eat, child." I flinched. The voice came from the front door, clear as day. Then, silence. I didn't rush back inside. I stood still, waited. No footsteps, no door opening. I stepped back and walked around to the front. The yellow porch light was still on, casting a glow over the wicker chair where my mother usually embroidered. Empty. I knocked. My mother opened the door, still groggy. "What's wrong, dear?" I swallowed hard. "Have you been outside at all?" She shook her head. Her expression wasn't confused, just tired. I was sleeping. Why? I didn't answer, just stepped inside. From that night, I started paying attention. And what I noticed frightened me in the quietest way. Not panic, not screaming, just a creeping cold inside me, like a cup of tea forgotten on the porch overnight. The voice only came after dark, only when I was outside, and it was always the same sentence. No more, no less, never a change in tone, like a recording played at the exact moment. Once, I tried hiding. I crouched behind the wall near the living room window, the door slightly ajar. My mother was asleep. The porch light glowed dimly, I stood there for nearly an hour, heart beating slowly, barely moving. "Come eat, child." I jumped. The voice was close. I leaned out. No one. I stepped outside. Silence. I stood there a long while, looking around, trying to listen. No retreating footsteps. No gust of wind. Nothing. Just an invisible presence that had crossed the line between familiar and wrong. Another night, I was folding blankets in my room when I heard the voice. But this time, something was slightly off. Very slight. Very faint. Just the ending of the word child was stretched a little longer, like the speaker hadn't memorized it well. I told my mother. For the first time. She was silent for a long while, then said, "So, you've heard it too?" I froze. Her response sounded like it had been waiting. I asked, "What do you mean? You knew?" She looked out the window. The nighttime forest was silent, like a trap with its jaws wide open. "When I was your age," she began, "I heard a voice too, but it was my parents, calling me out of the house." I clenched my fists, not from cold. She told me she had once been lured out, stepping off the porch, walking a few steps into the woods. But she turned back just in time, because the voice repeated 3 times, exactly the same. No one in the world says something identically 3 times in a row. No one can mimic emotion perfectly. "It only learns the voice," she whispered. "It doesn't understand emotion. It doesn't get tone, but it learns fast." I asked, "What is it?" She only said, "Not human, and it can't enter the house unless you answer." Since that night, I never stayed outside past 7 p.m., but I know it's still there, waiting, every night, learning. Part 3. Mom once heard it call. After the night my mother confessed she had once heard the same voices, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, not because I believed something was lurking just beyond the door, but because she had known all along. She knew and never told me. I lay on the bed, a strip of yellow light from the hallway stretching across the curtain. The ticking of the wall clock echoed like the heartbeat of an old house. A soft breeze slipped through the window slats, fluttering the curtain's edge, like an invisible hand gently brushing against my quiet world. I closed my eyes, and her words echoed in my mind. "Not human, and it can't come inside unless you answer." The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was pale gray. No sun, but not gloomy either. Mom was cooking porridge. The scent of ginger drifted through the kitchen. I sat down on the wooden chair, wrapped my hands around the warm teacup, and asked softly, "Can you tell me everything?" She didn't look at me right away. She just set the wooden spoon down, wiped her hands on her apron, and exhaled long and deep, as if she had been holding that breath her whole life. "When I was little," she began, her voice slow and steady like a lullaby. Your grandparents lived deep in the mountains. Their wooden house was near a stream, surrounded by forest on all sides. I closed my eyes and pictured it. The scene was eerily like our own home. Peaceful, isolated, with the sound of trees rustling like a private conversation. Back then, we didn't have electricity. Every house closed up early at night. No one wandered around after 7 p.m. Why not? I asked. Mom frowned. Because that's when the voices began. She told me that when she was 9, she once stayed out too long by the stream and lost track of time. The sun had already dipped behind the hills, its last light painting the treetops red. As she was walking home, she heard her mother's voice, my grandmother's, calling from behind, "Come eat, child." Exactly the same sentence I'd been hearing for nights. Exactly the same. I thought I'd gotten lost, she said. The path home didn't look familiar anymore. The trees on either side seemed to have shifted. She paused, her eyes distant, flickering with a memory that was equal parts nostalgia and fear. I followed the voice. It repeated 3 times, each spaced by a single breath, and each time, the voice sounded more like her. What did you see? I asked. A person, Mom said softly, sitting with their back turned on a stone in the middle of the forest. The moonlight was faint, but I could make out the figure. Looked exactly like my mother. Hair tied up neatly, slender frame. I held my breath. Mom leaned closer to me, lowering her voice like she was afraid something beyond the kitchen door might hear. But when I stepped closer, the person lifted their head before turning around. And I saw clearly, it had no face. I felt a chill run down my spine, not because of how eerie it was, but because my mother's voice never wavered. She wasn't trying to scare me. She wasn't making it up. Every word fell like truth compressed by years of silence. I said nothing. She continued. I ran, but the forest stretched endlessly. With every step, the voice came from ahead of me, like it was leading me, not chasing. How did you escape? She went silent for a few seconds, then said, I bit my tongue, hurt myself to stay conscious, and I remembered what my mother once told me. If the voice sounds too perfect, don't answer. Real people don't repeat the same sentence exactly like that. Humans have emotion. That thing only mimics sound. She turned back to the kitchen, ladled porridge into a bowl, and set it in front of me. The smell of ginger and fried shallots suddenly made me realize how hungry I was. After that night, she said, whenever I heard the voice, I stuffed cotton in my ears, locked the doors, and kept the lights on all night. When I grew up and left the mountains, I thought I'd escaped. I picked up a piece of salted egg and chewed slowly. But it followed you? She nodded, very slightly. It doesn't follow people, Mom said. It follows voices. I froze. Meaning? She looked me straight in the eyes. It learned my voice. imitated it, memorized it, and now it's using that voice to caw. We ate in silence. The porridge was delicious, as always, but I couldn't taste a thing. In my head, every other sound faded, except for one line. It follows voices. That night, I didn't go outside. I sat in the living room with the lights on. Mom lit incense and murmured something ancient, maybe a prayer. The wind outside picked up, and at exactly 7:23 p.m., "Come eat, child." The voice came from 3 directions at once. I couldn't tell if it was outside the front door, the kitchen window, or the wall beside my room. All I knew was one thing. It had perfected my mother's voice. Part 4. When Mom didn't answer. I don't know what woke me at 3:17 a.m. Not a sound, not a light. Maybe just a wrong beat in the house, like the heartbeat of an old home skipping out of rhythm. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, the curtains half closed. Outside was a pale, murky gray, the kind of light that isn't quite night, but not yet dawn. I listened. Silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. So quiet that there were no insects, no wind, not even the sound of trees brushing against one another. As if the forest was holding its breath. I stepped out of my room, bare feet on the wooden floor. My mother's door was wide open. At first, I didn't think much of it. I called softly, "Mom?" No response. I walked into the kitchen. No one there. The lights were off. The dining table was bare. No pots, no bowls, as if no one had cooked anything yesterday. I looked toward the front door. It was slightly ajar. Just enough to let a sliver of light spill in from the porch. I stepped closer, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. It wasn't locked. I opened it. The porch was empty. The forest mist was thick, freezing like ice water. At first, I hoped she had just stepped outside to water the plants, or maybe felt dizzy and needed some air. I called again, "Mom?" No answer. I ran around the house. No one. The feeling wasn't fear. It was like losing gravity. Like when you miss a step in the dark on a staircase, and your heart falls and gets stuck somewhere under your ribs. I grabbed my coat, my shoes, and a flashlight. Right before I stepped into the backyard, something deep inside told me, "Don't leave the porch." But then I heard it. My mother's voice, clear, coming from the woods. "Help me. Please, honey." I don't remember how I started running. Only the beam of the flashlight swinging across pine trunks, dewy grass, and faint tracks in the soil, like footprints pressed into soft earth. Her voice rang out again, closer. "Here, help me," I shouted. "Mom, I'm here." Nothing. Then crying, sobbing, hoarse and broken. Sweetheart, it tricked me. I ran like a madman, and then I saw her. Or what I wanted to believe was her, sitting against a thick pine tree, body hunched, long hair covering half her face, a dark green knit shawl, the same one my mom always wore when it got cold. I ran to her. "Mom!" She didn't look up. I knelt beside her and placed my hand on her shoulder, ice cold. "Mom, it's me. What happened to you?" She lifted her head, and I recoiled like I'd touched a live wire. It was my mother's face, but wrong. Not because it was deformed, but because it was too perfect. No expression. Eyes wide open, unblinking. Eyelids slightly stretched, like wax. Her mouth moved, as if reciting a memorized line. "Sweetheart, help me." The voice was flawless, but there was no soul in it. I backed away, slipping in a patch of wet ground. The person stood, slow, unsteady, like it wasn't used to the body it was wearing. I pointed the flashlight straight at its face, and I saw. Its eyes didn't reflect the light. Humans, no matter how dark it is, their eyes always reflect a little light. This thing didn't. It stepped toward me, then stopped, lowered its head, raised a hand slightly. Then, its voice changed to mine. "Mom, please." I screamed. I lost all control. I turned and ran. Footsteps behind me, slow, steady. It wasn't chasing me. It didn't need to. It knew I would come back. I ran until I saw the porch light of my house. I slammed the door shut, locked both bolts, backed up until my spine hit the wall. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks on the door. Not loud, not rushed, just perfectly timed. Like someone who knows you're there and knows you'll eventually have to open. I didn't move. Then I heard my mother's voice, right behind the door. "Sweetheart, open the door. I'm lost." I didn't answer. I remembered her words. "Unless you answer, it can't come inside." The voice fell silent. I sat there until morning, too afraid to close my eyes, too afraid to hope that my mother was still alive. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. All the doors were locked, curtains drawn tight, lights on day and night. I survived on canned food, cold rice, and filtered water from the emergency jugs Mom had stored in case of storms. I didn't open the door, didn't dare look outside, didn't dare listen. Because I knew, just once if I heard that voice again, I'd lose what was left of my sanity. At first, I thought it had left. 3 days, no knocking, no shadow flitting past the edge of the trees, no one calling my name in Mom's voice, or mine. I nearly convinced myself it was a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination after Mom disappeared. Maybe I was just paranoid. But then, night 4, 2:51 a.m. I was sitting in the living room under a dim fluorescent light, a cold cup of tea in my hand. I was about to get up and turn off the stove when I heard it scratch, a soft sound like fingernails gently dragging across wood. It came from the front door. I froze, my heart pounded, racing, but I didn't move. I listened. Scratch, scratch, then silence. I sat there for 15 minutes, motionless, didn't speak, barely breathed. And then, as if the thing outside was waiting for that stillness, a voice called out, "Sweetheart, Mommy's home." I felt every pore on my body tighten at once. That voice, perfect, not close, not similar. It was my mother's voice, down to the delicate tremble at the end of the word, home. I'd heard that voice my entire life, on the phone, in dreams, on old voicemails. And now, it was outside my door. I stepped backward, like a cat, pressing myself to the wall. I didn't dare answer, didn't dare get close. I remembered Mom's words. It can't come inside unless you answer. I slid down the wall, arms hugging my knees. 1 minute, 5, 10. Then footsteps on the porch, slow, heavy. Then, "Aren't you going to open? I made your favorite soup. You like it hot." I bit down on my lip until it bled. It had learned more. Not just the voice, but memories. I don't know how. Maybe Mom is still alive. Maybe it took her memories. Or worse, it fed on them. The next morning, I inspected every lock in the house. No signs of tampering. But I found a tiny, bare footprint on the damp cement. Longer than Mom's foot. Thin. Toes unnaturally uniform. Like it wasn't a real foot, but a rendered copy from a template. That night, I tied a cord around my wrist and attached it to the sofa arm. A way to restrain myself. To be sure I wouldn't sleepwalk, wouldn't open the door in a daze. I also played a recording of forest doors, still locked. But something hung in the air. The smell of sour soup. I walked to the kitchen. Empty. No pot. No food. Just a white porcelain bowl on the table, perfectly centered, like someone had placed it there, carefully. The bowl held only clear water, but when I leaned in, the stench of sour soup hit me hard, so strong I nearly vomited. I staggered back, hands trembling. The next morning, I dug out the old security cameras in the house. Part of the system Mom had installed after Dad died. I connected the drive and rewound the footage from the night before. And then, I saw a frame I will never forget. 3:13 a.m. Kitchen camera. A figure standing behind the fridge door. Still, not moving, facing the camera. I zoomed in. It was me. Except, I never left the sofa that night. I kept watching. That me stood there for nearly 10 minutes. Then, as if it sensed the camera, it tilted its head 90 degrees. An unnatural movement, like its neck was made of fake joints. Its eyes locked on the lens, no blinking, no pupils. I vomited until only bile came up. My vision blurred. The world began to spin. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights blazing. Chair pulled tight against the wall. My back pressed hard against cold wood. I held a kitchen knife, my wrist wrapped in a bandage from pulling the cord too tight the night before. The air felt heavy. I knew it would come. And it did. 3:08 a.m. A knock. 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 I didn't move. Then the voice. "Sweetheart, open the door for Mommy." Silence. Then, "Sweetheart, someone's here." I heard a second voice. Not Mom's, not mine. I froze. Two voices. One female, one male. One was Mom. The other, something else entirely. A long pause. Then, laughter. Mom's laugh. Not soft, but long, distorted, like tape being played backward. Hee 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 hee. I covered my ears, curled into a ball, and finally a whisper seeped in. "I know you're still alive. I learned fast." The next morning, I stepped onto the porch. The white porcelain bowl was still there, and inside, not water, a small bone, like a finger, pale, with dried blood at one end. I knelt quietly on the porch and cried, not out of fear, but because I knew my mother was truly gone. And even if I survived, I would never be the same again. Part 6. When my mother returned. I woke up to the smell of sour soup. Not a hallucination. Not the lingering scent of some old memory, but a real smell. Strong, warm, with hints of ginger and tomato, rising from the kitchen like a rope, pulling me out of it. Was morning. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting lines across the cold, tiled floor. I wasn't dreaming. I heard the clinking of a spoon against a pot, and then that voice. "You're up? I made fish soup. Come eat before it gets cold." I froze in place, every joint locked, my eyes wide, staring at the half-open door. I stepped out slowly. Each movement felt like stepping across thin ice. The kitchen lights were on. My mother stood there, her back to me, stirring soup on the stove. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, just like always. She wore the dark green sweater I'd washed for her a few weeks ago. Her posture, completely normal. "Mom," I called, my voice trembling. She turned around. That face, that smile, her eyes squinting slightly at the sunlight. No error, no blur, no hollow stare, no waxy expression, just my mother. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she chuckled. "It's only been a few days, and you look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer. I sat down at the table. She scooped me a bowl of soup. The aroma tore through my veil of suspicion and knotted in my throat. I watched her closely. Her hand movements, the way she picked up vegetables, her voice, her gaze, everything was right. Too right. "Where did you go these past few days?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She set the spoon down and smiled. I went into town. I wasn't feeling well, so I caught a ride to the clinic. Just to be safe, forgot to leave a note. The clinic's 40 kilometers away. Yeah, I hitched a ride with a delivery truck. The driver was nice. I nodded, but my heart pounded like a drum. She had never left without telling me. Never forgot a detail. I asked again, "Do you remember what my favorite dish is?" She smiled. "Of course. You like snakehead fish sour soup. No pineapple, extra okra, and lots of rice paddy herb. I even added a pinch of MSG, just like you always say." I sat still. I didn't even know if Mom remembered all that. But the way she answered, quick, smooth, made me feel unsafe. Like she was reading a line that had been rehearsed. That whole day, I watched her. She swept the floor, washed dishes, made tea, sat by the window reading. Everything was flawless. Too flawless. No mistakes, no slips of the hand, no nagging me about my shoes being messy, no yawns, no rubbing her eyes, no coughing, not a single human imperfection. That evening, I tested her. I asked, "Do you remember when I broke my arm?" She nodded, eyes warm. "When you were 7. Fell on the stone steps behind our old house. Had to wear a cast for a month. Do you remember what you said then?" She smiled. I said, "It's okay. Mommy's here." My blood ran cold. Because I remembered clearly, Mom had panicked. She cried. All she could say, over and over, was, "Dear God, please don't let it be broken." She never said, "It's okay. Mommy's here." I knew for certain. And now I was sure. That wasn't my mother. That night, I lay in bed, eyes wide open. Everything in the house seemed normal. The mother still told me good night, still closed my door gently, but I knew she was waiting for me to believe, waiting for me to fall asleep, waiting for me to drop my guard. 3 a.m. I heard something. A whisper. Like she was talking to someone in the kitchen. The voice was quiet, but it wasn't hers. It was wet, cracked. I gently opened my door. The kitchen was pitch black, but I saw her sitting at the dining table, hands flat on the surface, still. I backed away, and she turned her head, not like a normal person. She turned her entire head 180 degrees, without turning her body. Her eyes were pitch black, no whites. I slammed the door shut, and I knew it didn't need to learn anything else. It was perfect now. Part 7. When the calling no longer stops. I don't sleep anymore. I don't dare. Each night, I lie in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the dark wooden ceiling, the dim glow of the nightlight casting a faint halo, like a thin layer of skin stretched over a rotting secret. She, or it, still acts like my mother, still knocks on my door each morning to wake me for breakfast, still cooks, still does the laundry, still embroiders as if nothing had ever changed. Only I know. Only me. I tried leaving the house once, called a car to take me back to the city. But when the driver arrived and I stepped onto the porch, She was already standing there. Not angry, not blocking me, just smiling, and said only one thing: "Don't go. You'll miss me too much." And I stopped. I don't even know why. The driver waited 10 minutes, then left. I stood frozen at the doorway. When I looked back, she was still staring at me, unblinking. Her smile lasted a little too long. I started keeping a journal. Not on paper. I was afraid she'd find it. I typed everything into my phone, encrypted the notes, set a triple-layer password. Every night, I wrote, "Day 42. Today she stared at me while I ate. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Her eyes didn't reflect any light. Day 45. I broke a glass. The shards cut my hand. She didn't react. Didn't rush over. Just tilted her head, like she was studying. Day 50. I lied and said I had a nightmare where she turned into something else. She chuckled. I dreamed you weren't yourself either. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it hasn't killed me. Maybe it needs me to believe. Or maybe it's waiting for me to forget. Forget that Mom is gone. Forget that this replica is just a perfect mask. Night 58. I tried to leave again. This time, I didn't call a car. I slipped out the back at 4 a.m., walking the old trail, the one where I heard the first voice. I walked fast, breathing hard, my heart pounding. Then I heard her voice. "Sweetheart, where are you going?" Right beside my ear. I turned around. No one. But the ground beside me had footprints, parallel to mine, as if someone had been walking with me the whole time. I ran. I fell. Mud soaked my clothes. When I got home, she was already at the door, holding a towel. "I told you not to go. It's dangerous out there." I didn't answer. Day 64. I woke up and found my phone unlocked. The journal app was open. A new line had been added. I read it all. "You write beautifully." I deleted everything. Changed the password. Useless. I don't know how much longer I can last. This house isn't home anymore. I'm no longer the person I was. She doesn't need to do anything. Just be there. Act like Mom. Care for me like Mom. But every night, every time the lights go out, I hear something whispering in my head. Not a voice, a thought that isn't mine. It's slowly becoming her voice. Tonight, I'm writing this for the last time. I don't know who will read it. I don't know who will believe it. But if you've ever heard a voice calling from your porch, if you've ever heard a loved one calling your name when you know they're asleep or dead, please don't answer. Don't step outside. And if one day your loved one comes back, don't celebrate too soon. Look into their eyes. If their eyes don't reflect light, if they're too perfect, run. Or accept that you've stayed too long. Because I know the calling won't stop. It has finished learning, and now it's looking for someone new to call. It might be why